Some officers were just attacked so brutally that it's really unimaginable. You know, ripping gas masks off officers' faces and spraying their face with things like WD-40, motor oil, pepper spray, and then pushing the gas mask back on their face and covering the filter, so that's basically suffocating them.
Democrats had this election rigged right from the beginning. This is a fraud. Tremendous voter fraud.
It's a corrupt system.
The American people believe that the election was not fair, that there was a lot of fraud.
And we're not going to stop till it gets reversed.
Joe Biden, you will never be my president.
They have tried to steal this election in front of everyone. And as I told them 20 years ago, I tell them again, I don't know how this is going to end, but if they want to fight, they better believe they've got one.
So Donald Trump chose January 6th because he knew the Congress would be meeting in the Capitol.
It's pretty clear that what they wanted was to stop the certification of the election.
Democrats attempted the most brazen and outrageous election theft, and there's never been anything like this. And we're going to have to fight much harder. We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
I believe that President Trump invited and incited the mob in plain view because he held a rally by the White House when he invited them to go to the Capitol.
You could see all these protesters lining up outside these little fences. So there's probably a few hundred at that point, and a handful of cops, dozens of cops, not enough cops to protesters.
Oh, they got in.
They're moving past the police, tearing down the barriers. Police are moving. This is actually happening, people.
The crowd was just growing larger and larger by the minute. I was on the west front looking west, so I could just see the hundreds, thousands of people coming towards the Capitol from downtown DC. And very quickly, we just became entirely overrun and were so greatly outnumbered that it felt like the whole building became surrounded. It was very frightening.
We want Trump! We want Trump!
We saw things starting to get out of control. Them, people climbing the wall, trying to get in, fighting the officers, trying to get over the barriers and that sort of thing.
I think they wanted to commit acts of violence against members of Congress because that's what they said.
Who's Congress? Who's do you want your house back? Take it!
That one got me right in the face. That one broke my glasses. Holy look at that. Oh, they're getting in. They're going in. Holy.
So I get up and I look and I see now it looks like protesters are coming through the police line.
most of the fights that you saw between the rioters and the police were noticed mostly in that pit. It was almost like a wrestling ring, but that's on the west side. On the east side is where these stairs were. So I'm sitting there in my cab. I noticed two Trump supporters, two rioters, jump over the fence. They rocked back the fence to the point where they actually ran over the Capitol Police Department.
I need y'all to protect yourself.
It was what felt like thousands of people and very few officers. And it was sort of difficult to move because the crowd was so large.
This is insanity! City, man! It goes all the way down.
Where you got a bunch of people in the crowd, they're all packed tightly, they're all pushing forward, they're all trying to get over one another. Somebody falls and they're stepping on your chest, or you're crushed up against a wall or something along those lines, very easily. You can suffer traumatic injury.
I thought my entire squad was behind me, but it was only 3 or 4 other officers. So we pushed forward to try to stop them, but we could only make it so far before we were attacked. And that's when I was struck in the face and knocked back. And then before I knew it, I was attacked from the right side too. And I just was on my back, and my helmet had come down, or someone was on top of me, and I just couldn't see anything. And there I remember thinking that I might not make it home alive today.
We, saw some of the sicker patients, right? We saw the cardiac arrest. We saw some of the traumatic injuries. The barriers that MPD were trying to keep people back with, the fences, they were actually using those to carry patients out on.
There was one individual who was tormenting and teasing us, saying, "We're getting in that building." And I remember thinking, no, you're not. There's no way that you'll be able to be that brazen and that aggressive to actually make it past us. But he was right, unfortunately.
Stormed the Capitol building. They are marching through now.
Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, was in the House chamber. So she's in one chamber, and on the other hand, Vice President Mike Pence was presiding over the Senate vote. Those two politicians were the most vulnerable that day. They were both singled out as targets of the mob.
Is not about the good people of Arizona.
And it will stand in recess until the call of the chair.
We'll pause.
Protesters are in the building.
Thank you.
What's the purpose of storming Congress itself?
Because they work for us. They don't get to steal it from us. They don't get to tell us we didn't see what we saw.
It was a very close call on the Senate side because they cleared the Senate floor moments before the mob broke in. It could have been much, much worse on the Senate side. They took over the floor, and the so-called shaman even sat in Mike Pence's chair. So they violated the Senate in a way they didn't violate the House.
So some people have asked me, why didn't we start shooting? You have 16 bullets in that gun. There's 1,000 people. What are you going to do? How are you going to stop them?
Because imagine if there was a swarm of bees all over you, and they were very relentless, constantly yelling racial epithets and wherever else it might be.
Going into some of these offices and seeing how much destruction they cause with just ripping up filing cabinets, throwing papers all over, throwing books off the wall, and just destroying, breaking windows, breaking whatever they could.
The majority of the crowd was drunk. That's something that a lot of news stations did not speak on. They were day drinking. And a lot of them were drunk. You can smell the alcohol in their breath.
We want justice. We want equal, fair vote. We want a fair vote. We want a fair vote.
Nancy Pelosi was spirited out of the chamber. I did not see that because she was below me.
You could see police have their guns drawn, members and security have a huge bench, and they're throwing it up against the door of the chamber, and you can hear banging, you can hear glass shattering.
I was scared for my life. I called my family in California, and it just gave me this foreboding fear that we don't know what's happening here. This could be the end.
The police are now telling us to get down, hide behind our chairs, because now guns are drawn, and I assume they thought they were going to start firing at any moment.
They broke the glass? Everybody stay down! Get down!
And we heard this crash into the speaker's lobby, which is right off the floor. And then we heard gunshots.
Capitol Police killed somebody. They shot through a closed door. They killed a woman. Then the politicians ran off, left the jackboot thugs behind.
The police got us evacuated. We were like amongst the last people out on that third floor of the chamber.
Today, we come up here to the Capitol steps. Tried to get in the Capitol, they started gassing us and macing us. We kept trying to hold the line and go up to the state Capitol. We want to be heard. That's all we want to do is be heard. Nobody wants to listen. They want to gas and mace us.
All people broke through and raced through the building, and then the legislators got scared and left. So we didn't certify for Joe Biden, so that's good.
I went basically from that office in the Senate area of the Capitol over to the chute, they call it, the tunnel which leads out to the inauguration stage, where some of the worst fighting occurred. Some officers were injured, were just attacked so brutally that it's really unimaginable. You know, ripping gas masks off officers' faces and spraying their face with things like WD-40, motor oil, pepper spray, and then pushing the gas mask back on their face and covering the filter, so that's basically suffocating them. They had to breathe in what they were sprayed with. Really, anything they had on them, they were using against us.
They sprayed bear spray on the police. They were absolutely merciless. They were there for blood, and you could hear it in their voices. This was a murderous mob.
I call on President Trump to go on national television now to fulfill his oath and defend the Constitution and demand an end to this siege.
We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace.
I remember standing on the inauguration stage on the Upper West Terrace looking out and seeing at that point the crowd had diminished, and thankfully our law enforcement partners were there and were continuing to push them back. I think at that point the National Guard arrived, just painfully too late.
The president invited me, and he invited me. I had to come. It's I couldn't not come. It's too important. It's too important not to come.
I feel like I was supposed to be here. So when you're charged inside because I believe God wanted me to be here. So I am here, and she came along to support Mom.
Hours passed without us looking at our watches, and then we were told the building was clear. This is many hours later, after the National Guard and the Metropolitan Police came to the aid and the rescue of the Capitol Police.
They resumed the count back up. So we went back to almost business as normal, except shooting down the House chamber, you see like the broken glass and the broken chamber door. That was kind of unusual. And people continued to object to the count, and it took longer than it should. And I probably finally got out of there about 3:30 in the morning.
It was trashed, you know what I mean? There was garbage everywhere, you know what I mean? It wasn't like if you've ever been in the Capitol prior to it taking place, the Capitol is very much like a sanctuary, right? Very much like a church. It's clean, it's very pristine. The aftermath of it, you know, just kind of showed, you know, what happened.
I remember finding out that he had died, and just how it was such a punch in the gut to all of us. to have politicians downplay and diminish the events of that day when so many of us literally shed blood to protect them is incredibly frustrating and infuriating.
You don't go through that day, whether it was verbal violence or physical violence or psychological violence, that stays with you for a very long time.
I hope that people realize how bad it was and how much worse it could have been, but that our democracy is fragile, as evidenced by that day.
Tower 2 collapsed onto the Marriott Hotel, and the Marriott Hotel collapsed around us. It was pitch black, you couldn't breathe. The dust was so thick, it was caked in my ears and in my mouth, and I was trying to breathe. And I was on my hands and knees, and I was crawling